Pretty difficult when you're first starting the weave. It's just harder to make the wire nice and compressed together. So you'll just have to take a little extra time when you're starting the weave to do that. So you can go ahead and wrap like 3 or 4 times around this outer wire, then kind of bend it back so it goes with its other 2 wires. Keep it as far to the base as you can. And again, I'm going to move these up a little bit to make this easier. And once you have those few wraps around the bottom one, then you're going to be wrapping twice around all 3 of these wires. So I wrap twice. Again, I'm going to kind of push it together with my fingernail. If these loops things are getting in your way, feel free to kind of move them out a little bit for now. We can move them back at the end. And then I'm going to squish this together. So just wrap as tightly as you can. And it will look a little bit looser in the beginning, but it will look much nicer as you get going. Then you're going to go twice again around just your top wire here. So it looks like that. And then you're going to once again go twice around all 3 wires. And then once again twice around the bottom wire, or top wire I guess in this case. And then I'm going to go in with my pliers every so often and just squish the wraps down and squish them together. Make sure everything's tight. And for now, you can just leave this tail. We can cut that off at the end. So basically the 2 around the top, 2 around all 3, 2 around the top, 2 around all 3 is going to go on for a long, long time. So I am going to continue doing that for a while, and I will be right back. So I've gone a little ways down. I'm going to need to go a lot further, but I just wanted to stop for a second and remind you to, every few repetitions, go in and squish everything with your flat nose pliers. And then this little piece right here is starting to bother me, so I'm going to actually just flush cut it off at this point. And that just flew somewhere. And then just tuck in the end. I actually cut it so close that I don't think I need to do that. And then also just a safety reminder, this piece you're going to notice is going to hit you in the face and the eye and everything repeatedly, so just make sure you're wearing glasses or safety glasses. I assume most of you know to do that, but this particular piece is going to really start to bother you and hit you a lot in the face if you don't have some sort of protection on. So I'm going to just continue going down, because what we're going to want to do is we're going to have our beads on here eventually, and this is going to kind of mold around our beads and then wrap around. You'll see, but we are just going to keep going and going and going, and I will stop soon and give you some more direction. Okay, so I am still going. Pretty soon I'm going to try out my beads on here, and I'm going to see how I can mold this around them, but I still need enough so that I can wrap it all the way around this wire, so I have got to just keep going. I am already, let's see, I'm already about 1.25 inches wrapped here, so I'm just gonna keep going. Okay, so now how far am I? I am pretty much exactly 1.5 inches down. At this point, I am going to start auditioning my beads on this very obnoxious long wire here. So I'm going to make sure it's completely straight with the bail. So don't have it like curved out like that or like that. You just want it straight, and you want this one to be curved out. I'm going to take my beads. Again, it's the 5mm copper bead first, then the 12mm bead, and then the other 5mm bead. So your wire is still coming off, your 26 gauge wire is still coming off your spool. So this part is going to be a little bit fussy. But what you're going to want to do is basically we're going to mold this around your beads. So the way I do that is I get my flat nose pliers and I start to turn it towards me. And then keeping this, the main thing you have to remember here is keep this straight. Whoops. Keep this straight with the bail the whole time without curving it like that, without curving it like that. So you're going to take this piece and try to kind of mold it around and keep the 3 beads just as straight as possible. So it kind of looks like that, and I don't want it completely vertical, so I'm going to use my flat nose pliers and kind of move this a little bit facing up. And then now that I'm this far, I actually have enough to go around. So again, this part's a little tricky. Hold the beads up with your pointer finger and take this, wrap it around the wire, and try to keep the wire straight. It's really hard. So I'm gonna hold on to this wire actually, and then come around like that. So hopefully that made sense. And you're gonna want to keep, see, I didn't keep these very straight, so ideally you want to keep them as straight as you can. Again, it's very difficult to do on camera. So then what we're gonna do is continue weaving until we form it around this side and get up to where these wires are. And at this point you'll have this wire just sticking out here. It's pretty long, and unless you're going to use it for some other embellishment than the little spiral that I do on these at the bottom, you don't really need it to be this long at this point. So you can just cut it, I don't know, a few inches down, just to get some of it out of the way. So that part you don't need anymore. So now it's just a few inches of a tail. Doesn't really matter, but because I know people like specifics, I left 2.5 inch tail. So then what I'm going to do is I am going to continue to do the same exact weave. All, like I said, we're going to form it around here until we get to here. Right now it looks really weird. It looks like it has ears. But that will be covered at the end. So I'm going to just continue weaving for a while, and I'll see you in a moment. Okay, so as I'm going along here, I'm kind of trying to see how long I need this to be by forming it around these beads. And basically I'm going to want this weave to reach up to here, where these wires end. So that is what I'm aiming for. So you'll have to kind of mold it around your bead and then unmold it to weave more, and then mold it back, and then unmold it to weave more, because it's really hard to weave if you have it molded around the bead like this. So once I see I do have a little ways to go, I'm going to take it off the bead like this, and then just continue going until I get to a point where I think I'm going to reach right there. And remember, as always, to squish your weaves down with your flat nose pliers as you go. Okay, so now I'm pretty much at the point where this meets the bottom of these wires. And I've kind of gone and pushed this up a little bit, you know, just formed this as closely as I can around my bead. At this point, I am ready to go on to the next step, so I'm going to be ending this weave in a moment. I'm actually going to go up a little bit further so that this entire part that's visible on the front is covered in my weave, so I'm actually going to continue weaving yet a little bit more. Okay, so now I'm at the point where this molds around my bead and it completely covers the front here. Now I don't like the shape right here, it's kind of wobbly, so I'm going to go in with my flat nose pliers and kind of fix up the shape a little bit so that it looks a little neater. You can squish this down a little bit, squish this so that it's nice and tight. I'm about to be ending my wire here, this 26 gauge wire, so what I'm going to do is take my flush cutters. What did I just drop? Okay, I'm going to take my flush cutters and just go ahead and cut my 26 gauge wire, and then I'm going to just end my weave currently by wrapping it. So I already wrapped it twice around the bottom as usual. I'm just going to wrap it 2 more times around the bottom, and then I'm going to continue to the next step. So let me wrap it twice around the bottom here. So I am going to have to pull it out to do that. And then now it's actually the top that I'm wrapping it around. I'm going to go... Oh wow, I just undid it. So I went in the wrong direction. Alright, so I'm going around once, and then one more time. Okay, sorry, my battery was dying. So once I've wrapped it around that piece a few times, then I'm just gonna flush cut the end of it off of here. And then just use chain nose pliers or something to squish the end down. This part is a little bit hard again. So we're wrapped around the bead here, and you know, I still don't like the shape of this. I just think it doesn't look great down here. So I'm going to take my flat nose pliers and just adjust the shape a little bit so it looks a little bit more even and clean. Okay, and I can always adjust it a little bit more later. So then we're gonna take this and go around the bail, kind of holding it in place here so that it doesn't pull over the bead. And then take all 3 wires, oops, I hit the camera, and wrap them around like that. So now they're coming out this way, like that. And we have these weird ears in the back that are going to be covered eventually. Kind of wonder if I made them too big. I might have to go back and kind of fix those up at the end. But now we have our bead framed by this part, and we're going to eventually be starting another weave here. And just so you know, you can modify whichever weave, 3-wire weave you want to use here if you want to use a different weave. I just am doing it this way, but you can definitely, once you get this pattern down, you can change up whatever you want. So I am going to prepare, I'm going to get my 26 gauge wire ready to start the same weave on these 3 wires here. And then I'm also going to be working off the spool again, just because I'm going to need so much wire. So I think I misspoke and said I was going to be using the same weave, but I'm going to be using a slightly different weave for these, because I'm going to be incorporating my 6 or 7 beads, copper beads, and I just realized mine somehow flew all over the place. But I'm going to be incorporating these little guys coming up. So now I have my 26 gauge wire coming off my spool. I'm going to straighten that out. And I'm going to start out by creating around 7 coils around this outer wire. So I'm going to do that. Just stick the tail here and hold it up like that out of my way. Why is this not focusing? And I'm going to start the coils right after this part that crossed over here. Oops. And just remember to keep the coils as tight as possible. And of course the first few might be a little loose, but you can always fix those. So I'm going to go in 1, 2, actually, you know what? I'm going to do them a little further down the wire and just pull them down, because that will probably be easier. 1, 2, and easier to show here anyway. 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So I did my first 7 coils here. I'm going to squish that together. I just picked up my chain nose pliers. You can use your flat nose pliers. And I'm going to push those down until I reach the beginning of this previous weave. Hopefully that makes sense. If not, you can see what I'm doing here. Hopefully. So then I'm going to take my first bead, my first 3mm copper bead, stick it on here. And the reason I wanted my spiral to start here is because my bead won't go any further this way because it's kind of stopped by the previous weave. So I want the spiral to match up with the bead. So there we go. And then I am going to go over all 3 wires twice now. So there's once. And it's always trickier starting out. Once. Make sure your wires stay nice and parallel. And then I'm going to go over this bottom wire another 7 times. So, really want to squish this down here so it's not close enough. Okay. 1, sorry, I keep bumping the camera. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Straighten out my 26 gauge wire, and then I am going to, I don't like how this keeps spreading out like this. I'm gonna kind of go like this, and then I'm gonna get my second bead and stick it on this outer wire. And I want it to go all the way down here, so I'm gonna go like this for now so that it will go way down. So let me get my second bead, stick it on that wire, and then put this back down like this. Except I don't want it to have that weird crimp. And then once you push that down as far as you can, I'm going to go around once. And I like to just rotate this whole thing sometimes to do this so it's nice and tight. I'm going to go around twice. And then I'm back here where I want to go around another 7 times on this bottom wire. And then pull this up again so I can put my next bead on. Grab one of my beads and stick it on there. Push this back down, and then I am going to go around all 3 wires twice again, making sure to keep everything nice and tight. And I'm still working off my spool here. So 1 and 2, and then 7 times around the bottom wire. And then once again, I'm going to lift this up so it can accommodate my bead. I'm going to get my next bead and stick it on. Okay. Push that back together, and then twice around all 3 wires. Once and twice. And then again, just 7 times around the wire facing you. And we're going to accommodate another bead here. So once and twice around all 3 wires, and then again, whoops, going over this bottom wire 7 times. Let me get myself some more of my 26 gauge wire from the spool. And I want to get another bead on there. I'm going to take a minute and just squish things with my flat nose pliers. And eventually this is going to be formed around here. For now I'm just kind of going straight like this, but eventually it will be formed like this. At this point I'm going to get rid of this tail here of my 26 gauge wire. And we continue. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 beads, so I want 6 beads total. So I'm going to put on my last bead here. And then I'm going to go 7 times again. And this time I am going to start forming this around here. With my fingers. So I know it's kind of hard to see what I'm doing here. And these wires at the top, I kind of want to get a little closer together. So I'm going to try to squish those together as much as I can. And then you can kind of use your flat nose pliers to adjust things. Okay, so as you can see, I'm sort of forming it around my previous weave there. So I am going to now move it away a little bit, and instead of putting a bead, I'm just going to make 2 wraps after my 7 wraps on the bottom wire without the bead. And then what we are going to do now is continue with this weave. So it will be 2 on the bottom, 2 over all 3. 2 on the bottom, 2 all over all 3. You know what I'm saying. So I'm going to go ahead and go twice around the bottom, and you might have to kind of pull this apart again to do this. So twice on the bottom. And twice around all 3. And twice on the bottom. Twice around all 3. And in a minute here, I'm going to squish with my flat nose pliers. So once I've done a few repetitions there, I'm going to just go like this, this, so that these 3 wires stay nice and parallel. And what I am aiming for is to wrap... Let me get these out of the way. Whoa! Okay, so what I'm aiming for here is to kind of do the same thing we did before, where we're going to go around and back over here. So we're going to do the same thing again. I am still trying to form this around here. So I'm going to take a minute and just kind of adjust it, and I will be right back. Okay, so I'm just continuing my weave, the 2 on the bottom, 2 around all 3, and I'm going to do that for a little while. Okay, so I have woven far enough along now that I'm ready to twist this around this bottom wire. So I'm going to position it so that I'm ready to twist and stick it under where I did this previously, and then I'm going to hold it here and go, oops, all the way around until you're back out here. So you're going to basically be doing the same thing that you did earlier. And at this point, you can kind of pause and adjust this to make sure it's how you want it before continuing with your same weave. So I'm going to kind of adjust that real quick and make sure it's all how I want it. Okay, so now I'm just going to continue doing my weave of 2 at the bottom, 2 around all 3, all the way up until I'm able to curve it up to here. So as I get further along with my weave, I'm going to start to, again, mold it around and see how far I've gotten. So I'm going to do that with my fingers here and just go like this. And you can also get your flat nose pliers to help you out a little bit. So I do still have a little ways to go here because I want to make this go all the way up to here, basically to the top of these three wires, so to right there. So I am going to continue my weave a little bit more. Okay, so now I've woven up to a point where I am at the top of those 3 wires I was talking about, and I am about ready to be finishing off my bail part of my pendant. You want to mold this the best you can to this inner piece, and you can do all kinds of adjustments, but the next step that you're going to want to do is to coil pretty far down the top wire here. So you're going to just start coiling, and maybe leave about an inch at the end. So I'm just going to take my 26 gauge wire that's coming off of my spool and just continue coiling just on the top wire here. Okay, so I coiled on my top wire till probably about 1.5 inches down. It doesn't actually need to be till 1 inch down, that's pretty far. Coiling is so boring. Anyway, I'm going to flush cut the end of my 26 gauge wire off of there. I'm just going to use my chain nose pliers to tuck in the end of my 26 gauge wire if I need to. Mine cut very close, so I don't usually need to. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is, this is kind of hard to show, but I'm going to take these 2 bottom wires, and this is going to take a lot of adjustment. I'm going to take only the 2 bottom wires and go around my bail, and then kind of move them under this wire and go around again. And then I am just going to cut both ends about right there. So there's 1 and 2. I think I'm going to make those even a little bit shorter if I can. Okay, and I'm going to squish them down on the back of the bail. And then I'm going to kind of straighten out my coiled wire, and you will get a chance to kind of fix this if it's not quite the shape you're going for. I'm going to take my coiled wire and go around and then around a second time. So I'm going to use my flat nose pliers and kind of make those push together. So I guess I really didn't need to coil that far because I'm going to be cutting off the coil around here. So I'm going to pull this off and separate where I want to cut off my coil, and then this is just so out of focus. I am going to go in carefully and cut the end of the coil and take that off of the wire. So now my coil ends here, and sometimes I do unwrap this and kind of adjust it a little bit and push my coil in more because it does spread out when you wrap it around. So I'm going to push my coil in and go back around. And then I'm going to cut off the end of my wire, so there's just a little bit there. And I'm going to try to press it kind of against the bail with my pliers. Get these all nice and smushed. Close enough. Okay, so now you can see these in the back, and I don't like that, so I'm gonna push them together a little bit. And down. So that they kind of get out of the sight of the front of the pendant. Because I really don't like that you can see them. Okay, so now I don't like how this looks kind of flat here, so I'm gonna go ahead and like go in with my flat nose pliers and just try to do some adjustments. And you can continue adjusting and all that. So now all that we have left to deal with, of course prior to oxidizing and polishing if you desire, is this tail. Now sometimes I've left it longer and I've kind of looped it up here and put more beads and done some stuff, but this time we are just going to create a spiral at the bottom. So this tail, I think I said it was about 2.5 inches. 2.5 inches? Yeah, I'm gonna cut it down to 1.5 inches. Maybe even a little bit less than 1.5 inches. And you could have done that earlier. I just wanted to leave the option of, I don't know, in case you wanted to use it for something else. But now what I'm gonna do is work on creating a spiral. You know what? I think I even need less than that. So I'm gonna take off another maybe 1/4 inch. Okay, so I did a little bit more adjusting and stuff. So now I'm gonna take this tail, turn my pendant upside down, and I'm going to get my round nose pliers and start to create a spiral. So the way I'm gonna do this is I'm gonna turn it to my left. So once I get about that far, I don't like how this is kind of straight when I start out my spiral, so I'm going to cut off that very end. So I'm going to get my flush cutters and just cut off this much so that my spiral is going to end up more curved on the inside. So then I'm going to take my round nose pliers again and continue to create a spiral. And you can use your flat nose pliers too to tighten it up a little bit. Ooh, don't take your flush cutters instead of your round nose pliers. Okay, so once you have the inside spiral about the right size, I think I'm going to try to make mine a little smaller. Whoops. Once you have the inside spiral about the right size, you can take your flat nose pliers and you know what? I did not leave enough of a tail at the end, so I shouldn't have told you to cut off so much. I'll go back and edit that. But so I just redid my spiral size a little bit smaller because I was dumb and didn't leave enough of a tail. So anyway, I'm still just using my flat nose pliers to curl it. And then what I'm gonna do with this is take, and this is optional, but I find it takes out some of the marring in the wire and it just looks better. I'm gonna take my chasing hammer. This is a Frets hammer that I got on the Rio Grande website. And I'm gonna flatten this out on my bench block. And you can flatten it out as much as you want. This one I kind of minimally flattened it. And this one I flattened it a lot. So I'm probably gonna do it kind of in between on this one. Okay, so that's about good. I'm just gonna take this and turn it up onto the front of the pendant. And your spiral should hopefully look bigger and better because you will have used the correct tail size. I don't know what I was thinking in making such a small tail. And you can just adjust it how you want it. And that is basically how you make this pendant. So the front and the back, of course, are going to look different every time you make it. And I think this pendant looks much better oxidized. So I was going to show you in this video how I oxidize and polish this. But this video is just so long that I think I just want to explain what I do. The first thing I do is I get my XL gel, my liver of sulfur XL gel, and I'm sure you can buy this online. I bought it at a jewelry supply store, but I get this, I take a tiny bit, maybe like an 1/8 to 1/4 of a teaspoon in a little jar. So here's my glass jar I use for size comparison. I put about 1/8 to 1/4 of a teaspoon in here. I fill the water up to about, I use hot tap water to about here. Dunk my piece in and leave it in there. Then I pull it out with my spoon or a plastic knife or whatever. Wash it off with blue Dawn soap usually and water in the sink. I dump my excess liver of sulfur in my front yard on some of my plants. Apparently it's good for plants. And then once I have oxidized it and then washed it, I use steel wool number 0000, so quadruple 0 steel wool that you can buy at Home Depot, and I go over all the high points meticulously all over, and I do this over a paper bag because the steel wool has pieces that just fall out everywhere, and so you want to have something to catch those pieces when you're going over this. And the final step after I use the steel wool is I use a Pro Polish pad. It's a little square, let me see if I have one nearby. So a Pro Polish pad is this little square polishing pad that you can buy at on the Rio Grande website. Again, it's Pro Polish pads. And I go in and just polish off all the high points. And this is nice because you can get more detailed. You can take like the edge of it and go like this and blah blah, and these beads will polish off really nicely. They'll oxidize nicely. So yeah, I go in with the Pro Polish pad, and that is how I finished oxidizing it. I also said I was going to show how to make the clasp in this video, but again, this video is just so long that I think I will hold off on that and maybe show that in a future video. But yeah, as you can see, each of them turn out pretty different. Here was my original one, and that's one that I did already oxidize and polish, so to me it looks much cooler in an oxidized finish. So I hope I didn't make this too difficult to follow. I hope I didn't bore you to death. And yeah, if you have any questions that I didn't already answer in the video, please leave me a comment below and I will try to answer questions. And yeah, I hope you liked the tutorial, my very first tutorial. Okay, I'm gonna stop talking now. Have a good day and good luck.